Ethan sat at his desk, hunched over a holographic blueprint of a damaged starship. It was a quiet day on the isolated research station, far from the bustle of the galaxy's main trade routes. Ethan preferred it that way. He was an engineer, not a fighter, and this station offered him peace to work on projects without the distraction of 100 different problems. Today, however, that peace was about to be shattered. The call came in just as Ethan was about to take his lunch break. A message flashed across his console. He clicked it open, expecting another routine maintenance request. Instead, a strange alien face appeared on the screen. The woman had striking features with sharp eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of the hologram. Her skin was a deep shade of blue, and her dark hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall. "Are you the engineer?" she asked, her voice steady but firm. Ethan blinked, taken aback by her sudden and direct approach. Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" he replied, trying to mask his surprise. He quickly adjusted his seat, trying to look more professional. "I need your help," she said. "My ship has been damaged, and I require an engineer to make repairs." Ethan frowned. "You're a pilot, right? Can't you fix it yourself?" She shook her head, her expression darkening. "No. The ship's systems are beyond my control. I need someone who understands the technology better than I do." Ethan stared at the screen, unsure of what to make of the request. The ship she mentioned was far out in the neighboring sector, a journey that would take days to complete. But the desperation in her eyes made him pause. This wasn't a typical call for help. "All right, I'll need some details. Can you send over the ship's diagnostics?" he asked, hoping it would give him a better idea of what he was dealing with. The woman nodded, and within moments, a new file appeared on his screen. Ethan quickly scanned the diagnostic report and his frown deepened. The damage was more severe than he had anticipated. It wasn't just a small repair. This was a critical system failure. Some of the damage looked like it had been caused by a major attack. "Looks like a serious job," Ethan muttered to himself, his fingers hovering over the console. "But I'll give it a go. Just who are you exactly?" The woman hesitated for a moment, then said, "I'm Varia." "Varia? Just Varia?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Do you have a title or something?" She didn't respond immediately. For a moment, she simply stared at him with those piercing eyes, as if weighing how much to reveal. Then, she spoke again, her voice softer now. "I am a warrior. But you will know me by another name soon enough. I am not from your world, engineer. You do not need to know more." Her words left Ethan feeling uneasy, but he didn't let it show. "All right, well, I'll get to work. Send me your coordinates and I'll see what I can do." Varia's face softened slightly as if relieved by his agreement. "Thank you. I will await your arrival." The screen went dark, and Ethan leaned back in his chair. He stared at the blinking console, his mind racing. Something about this woman didn't sit right with him. She was too calm, too collected for someone stranded in space, and her request for help was oddly vague. But he'd dealt with strange situations before, and the call for help was genuine. He couldn't deny that. The journey to her ship would take several days. Ethan knew he needed to prepare. He packed up his tools and gathered the necessary equipment. As he prepped his shuttle, he couldn't shake the feeling that this job was going to be far more than just fixing a broken ship. There was something about Varia that intrigued him, and he was certain she wasn't telling him everything. Ethan's shuttle hummed quietly as it drifted through the vast expanse of space. The trip had taken longer than expected. He had spent hours staring out into the endless void, his thoughts racing. Varia's sudden appearance and cryptic words still haunted him. Who was she really? Why had she asked for his help? When Ethan finally arrived at her coordinates, the sight that greeted him was unlike anything he had ever seen. The ship was massive, far larger than anything he had ever repaired. It looked like a warship, but its design was unlike any that Ethan had encountered. The ship's outer hull was dark and sleek, with strange markings that glowed faintly along the edges. He hovered his shuttle close to the ship, guiding it toward an open bay where Varia awaited him. As he stepped off the shuttle, Ethan was struck by how different the ship felt. There was an energy about it, something ancient and powerful, yet undeniably alive. Varia stood there waiting for him with a calm expression, her eyes fixed on him. "I'm glad you've made it," she said simply. Her voice was steady, almost distant, as if she had expected him all along. Ethan couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. "You didn't mention how big your ship was," he remarked, trying to sound casual. Varia's lips twitched, slightly, though it wasn't quite a smile. "Size doesn't matter. What matters is what happens next." She led him through the ship's corridors, which were both high-tech and strangely organic, as if the ship itself was part of some ancient civilization. The walls were lined with strange symbols and glowing panels, and the air was thick with an energy that Ethan couldn't quite place. It felt like the entire place was alive, breathing with an intelligence far beyond his understanding. As they walked, Varia spoke, her voice calm and even. "The damage is worse than I initially described. It's not just the systems that are killing, it's the heart of the ship. It's a delicate piece of technology, and it's tied to more than just its function. It's tied to the fate of an entire empire." Ethan's curiosity deepened. "What do you mean by that? You said you were a warrior, but you never mentioned anything about an empire." Varia stopped suddenly, turning to face him. Her eyes held, a depth that was almost too much to bear. "You must understand, Ethan. I am not just any warrior. I am the Empress of the Kalari Empire. And this ship, this vessel, is not just a warship. It is a symbol of our strength, our future. Without it, my people are lost." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. You're the Empress?" His voice was barely a whisper. He had thought she was just a soldier, just a woman in need of repairs. But now, hearing the truth, everything changed. Varia nodded, her expression unreadable. "Yes, I am Varia, the last of my line. The Kalari Empire is in turmoil, and I must reclaim it, or else it will fall into chaos." Ethan stood there for a long moment, struggling to process her words. He had never expected this. The woman he had been working with, the woman he had come to know, was the ruler of an entire empire. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I've been working on your ship, and all this time I had no idea who you really were." Varia sighed, looking down for a moment. "I did not trust you at first. I needed someone who would help without judgment, without knowing who I truly was. I could not afford to let anyone in too closely. But now, I need you, Ethan. I need your skills, your mind. Without you, I cannot save my people." Ethan didn't know what to say. The gravity of the situation was overwhelming. He was just an engineer, a simple man from a quiet station. He had no experience with empires, no understanding of politics or power. And yet, here he was, standing in the heart of a warship, face to face with the ruler of an entire galaxy. "I don't know what to do," Ethan admitted quietly. "I'm just an engineer. I fix ships. I don't fix empires." Varia placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle. "That is what I need, Ethan. Someone who can see the truth of the technology. Someone who can help me repair it and restore my empire. I cannot do this alone." Ethan's mind raced. This was no longer just a job. It was a turning point in his life. He could walk away, return to his quiet life, and forget everything. Or he could stay and risk everything for a woman who was not just a warrior, but a ruler. The fate of an entire empire rested on his shoulders. I'll help," Ethan said, his voice steady but uncertain. "But I need to know more. What happened to your empire? How did it fall into chaos?" Varia led him to a large control room at the center of the ship. She activated a holographic display showing a map of the galaxy. The Kalari Empire was once powerful, but we have been divided. Political factions have torn us apart. And now, there are enemies within and outside of our borders. The ship you are repairing is not just a vessel. It is the key to restoring the balance. Ethan studied the map, taking in the vastness of the Empire's territory. "I don't understand. How can a ship fix all of this?" Varya's eyes darkened. This ship is not just a machine. It is a symbol of my family's legacy, a symbol of power. It holds the technology to unite the factions, to bring my people together again. But if it falls into the wrong hands... Her voice trailed off, and Ethan could feel the weight of her words. This was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. He wasn't just fixing a ship. He was playing a part in something far greater, something that could change the course of history. The days that followed were filled with work, tension, and a growing sense of unease. Ethan found himself deep in the heart of Varya's warship, repairing systems that seemed far beyond his expertise. Despite the strange alien technology and the pressure of the situation, Ethan couldn't help but be impressed by the sheer scale of the ship. It wasn't just a vessel. It was a masterpiece of engineering, something that had been built to withstand not just time but entire wars. As he worked, Varya stayed by his side, guiding him through the complexities of the repairs. She was always calm, always composed. Her presence was both reassuring and intimidating at the same time. Ethan couldn't quite understand it. She was a ruler, yet she didn't act like one. She didn't sit on a throne or give orders from a distance. Instead, she worked alongside him, as if she were just another soldier, just another person who needed help. One evening, as Ethan adjusted a damaged power core, he found himself speaking before he could stop himself. "Varya, why didn't you just send for a fleet of engineers? Surely you have access to more skilled workers than me," he asked, his hands still working carefully on the machinery. Varya didn't look at him, but her voice was steady as she replied. "It's not just about skill, Ethan. I needed someone who could think outside the box, someone who could see what others could not. I knew you would understand." Ethan was silent for a moment, unsure how to respond. He wasn't sure if it was his engineering skills that she saw, or something else. But before he could ask more, Varya continued. "Sometimes it's not enough to have the best warriors or the best technology. Sometimes you need someone who can see the bigger picture." Ethan nodded, still unsure of where this was leading, but as the days passed, he began to understand. Varya wasn't just a ruler. She was a survivor. Her empire had fallen into chaos because of betrayal and greed, but she had not given up. She had fought for every inch of her future, and now she was asking him to help her reclaim it. He couldn't help but admire her strength. She didn't demand loyalty. She didn't try to manipulate him. Instead, she showed him the truth of her situation and trusted him to make his own decision. One night, as they took a break from their work, Varya led Ethan to the observation deck. From there, they could see the stars stretching out in all directions, endless and beautiful. "I never asked to be a ruler, Ethan," Varya said quietly, her gaze fixed on the stars. "I was trained to fight, to lead in battle. But when the time came, I had to step up. I had to be more than just a soldier. I had to be the Empress." Ethan watched her closely, feeling a strange sense of connection. It must be hard carrying all that weight. Varya looked at him then, her eyes intense but soft. "It is. But I would rather carry this weight than let my people fall into the hands of those who would destroy everything we have built." Ethan felt the weight of her words. He wasn't sure how much he could help her, but he knew one thing. Varya was not like any ruler he had ever encountered. She wasn't about power for its own sake. She wasn't driven by greed or ego. She was driven by a deep sense of responsibility, a need to protect her people and restore what had been lost. The next few days were a blur of work. Ethan had grown used to the ship's strange systems, learning its ins and outs as he worked side by side with Varya. They spent long hours together, their conversations ranging from technical discussions about the ship's systems to more personal talks about their lives. One evening, as they finished a long day of repairs, Varya surprised Ethan with a question. "Why do you help me, Ethan?" she asked, her voice serious. "Why did you agree to stay?" Ethan paused, his hands resting on a console. He hadn't really thought about it much before, but now, as he considered her question, he realized the answer was simple. "I help because I believe in what you're doing," he said. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that if I walk away now, I'll regret it. I want to see this through. You deserve a chance to fix what's broken. Varya studied him for a moment, and then, to his surprise, she smiled. It was a small smile, but it was genuine. Thank you, Ethan, she said softly. You don't know how much that means to me. For the first time since they had started working together, Ethan saw something different in her, something more vulnerable, more human. It was a side of her that she rarely showed. But in that moment, standing there on the observation deck, he saw the weight of the empire she carried and the sacrifice she had made to protect it. Over the next few days, they continued working, but their bond grew stronger. Varya's trust in Ethan deepened, and Ethan's admiration for her only increased. It became clear that they weren't just allies. They were partners united by a shared purpose. As the repairs to the ship neared completion, Varya began to open up more about her plans. She spoke of the political factions vying for control, of the empire, the power struggles that had torn it apart. She spoke of the enemies that were closing in, both within the empire and outside it. But through it all, there was one constant: her determination to fight, to survive, and to reclaim her throne. Ethan didn't fully understand the politics of it all, but he knew one thing for certain. Varya was not going to give up without a fight. And neither was he. Ethan stood at the controls of the ship, his hands steady on the console as he navigated through the vast emptiness of space. The journey had been long, but the final leg of their mission was the most dangerous yet. Varya's enemies were closing in, and their path led straight into the heart of enemy territory. For the first time since he had joined Varya, Ethan felt a sense of unease. The stakes were higher now. He wasn't just fixing a ship, he was helping to lead a rebellion against powerful factions that could crush them in an instant. And yet, despite the danger, there was no turning back. Varya's trust in him had only grown, and with it his own commitment to her cause. As they neared the border of enemy space, Varya's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. Prepare yourself, Ethan. We are entering their territory now. Stay alert. Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the empty space around them. He had never been this far into hostile territory before. The enemy ships patrolled these regions constantly, and even the slightest mistake could lead to a deadly confrontation. We're in, Ethan said, glancing at the display. We're about to enter their system. Should I expect an immediate attack? Varya's expression remained calm, though there was a flicker of something in her eyes. The fleet will be waiting for us, but I'm not concerned about them. We have another plan. Before Ethan could ask more, the warning alarms blared. The ship shook slightly as a group of enemy fighters appeared on the radar, quickly closing in on their position. They found us faster than I thought, Ethan muttered, his hands quickly moving to adjust the ship's course. I'll try to outrun them. No, Varya said, her voice steady. We'll need to fight, but not in the way they expect. Ethan looked at her, confused. Fight? I'm not a fighter. I'm an engineer. Varya's eyes locked onto his, her expression hardening with determination. I know, but you've proven yourself more than capable. Trust me, Ethan. We'll do this together. With that, Varya took her place at the tactical controls. Ethan hesitated for a moment but then nodded, stepping back to give her space. He knew that when Varya spoke, it was not just a suggestion, it was a command. And for some reason he trusted her. The enemy ships were getting closer. Their sleek, dark designs were unmistakable, their markings a symbol of the ruthless warlords who controlled this part of the galaxy. Ethan could see them on the display now, their weapons locking onto their position. Get ready, Varya said, her fingers flying over the controls. We're going to make them think we're an easy target. Ethan felt the ship's engines hum louder as Varya executed a series of maneuvers, her movements quick and precise. The enemy ships followed closely, trying to get a lock on their vulnerable position. But Varya was ready. She activated a hidden cloaking system, causing their ship to blend into the darkness of space. To the enemy, it seemed as though they had vanished. They won't know what hit them, Varya said quietly. For a few moments, everything was silent. Ethan could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of what was to come. The cloaking system wouldn't last forever, and once it wore off, the enemy would be ready to strike. But in those moments of quiet, Ethan realized something. Varia wasn't just playing a game of survival. She was playing to win. He looked at the readouts. The enemy ships were still searching, their sensors scanning the space around them, unaware of where their target had gone. Varia had done this before. She knew exactly how to handle these situations. Then, without warning, Varia deactivated the cloaking system and engaged the ship's weapons. The ship jolted forward with surprising speed, and the enemy fighters were immediately caught off guard. The first few shots hit their targets, disabling the nearest enemy ship. Before the others could react, Varia had already adjusted their trajectory, dodging incoming fire and returning shots with precision. Ethan watched in awe as she controlled the ship, moving with fluidity and ease, as if she were born to command. His heart raced not from fear, but from a growing sense of admiration. She wasn't just the empress of an empire. She was a warrior, a strategist, a leader. "Keep an eye on their movements," Varia commanded, her voice steady. "We'll need to retreat soon, but we can take down a few more before we do." Ethan nodded, his hands moving instinctively to the console, monitoring the enemy ship's movements. "I see them. They're trying to regroup." "Let them," Varia said. "We'll strike again." The battle continued, and with each passing moment, Ethan found himself more and more impressed by Varia's leadership. She wasn't just reacting to the enemy. She was anticipating their every move, countering their attacks before they could even land a hit. It was as if she knew exactly what they would do next, and each time they tried to close in, she outmaneuvered them. But despite their skill, the numbers were against them. More enemy ships were arriving by the minute, and Varia knew they couldn't. "Keep this up forever. Prepare to retreat," she ordered. "We've caused enough damage." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "Retreat? But we're not far from the planet." "I know," she replied. "But we don't want to risk being surrounded. Let's move quickly." With the press of a button, Varia disengaged from the battle and sent the ship into a rapid escape trajectory. The enemy ships followed, but Varia's quick thinking kept them just out of range. Ethan could feel the ship's engines firing, propelling them faster than he thought possible. "We've made it," Varia said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He glanced at the view screen. Beyond them lay a hidden planet, its surface barely visible in the distance. Varia turned to him, a look of quiet pride in her eyes. "This is only the beginning, Ethan. The real fight starts now." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of what they had just survived, and the even greater weight of what was to come. The days following their narrow escape were filled with preparation and tension. The small group of loyal soldiers Varia had gathered was ready for the next phase of their mission, retaking control of her empire. Ethan had never imagined himself in a situation like this. He was used to working with machines, not fighting wars, but somehow working beside Varia had become more than just a job. It had become a purpose. Varia was relentless in her preparations. She spent hours in the war room, strategizing with her commanders, and making sure every detail was accounted for. She spoke with confidence, her voice carrying authority that Ethan had never heard from her before. She was no longer just the woman who had asked for his help. She was the Empress, commanding her forces with precision and grace. Ethan found himself drawn into the planning. He wasn't a military strategist, but he had an engineer's mind, and that made him valuable. He helped design the layout for the final assault, making sure the ship's systems were in perfect working order. Varia relied on his expertise more than ever, trusting him to help her win this fight. The time had come. The final battle for her empire was at hand. Varia stood at the front of the room, her eyes scanning the holographic map of the enemy's stronghold. It was a heavily fortified planet, the heart of the faction that had been trying to destroy her empire. The plan was simple: infiltrate the planet's defenses, disable their main weapons, and capture the leadership. Ethan stood beside her, his mind working quickly as he studied the map. "We need to be quick. Once we make our move, the element of surprise will be our only advantage." Varia nodded. Exactly. We can't afford to waste time. Every minute we delay gives them more time to prepare. The ship, now fully repaired and upgraded, was ready for the mission. The crew was anxious, but there was no turning back. Varya had made it clear. This was the only chance they had to take back control. As they made their approach to the planet, Ethan's nerves began to tighten. He wasn't a soldier and he wasn't used to combat, but he knew his role. His job was to ensure that the ship's systems worked perfectly, that the weapons fired on target, and that nothing went wrong. The moment of truth arrived. Varya's voice came over the intercom, calm and commanding. Prepare for landing. Remember your mission. We take the planet, and we take back our future. The ship's engines roared as they entered the planet's atmosphere. Enemy fighters swarmed around them, trying to intercept their descent. Ethan watched the tactical readouts, his heart racing as he monitored the incoming ships. Shields holding steady, he muttered to himself. Weapons ready. Varya was in her element. As the enemy fighters closed in, she gave the order. Fire! The ship's cannons fired in quick succession, cutting through the incoming fighters with deadly precision. Ethan's hands moved quickly on the controls, guiding the ship through the chaos as Varya barked orders. The enemy ships fell back, but they weren't giving up without a fight. The battle had only just begun. We've breached the atmosphere, Ethan called out, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. Good. Now let's finish this, Varya replied, her voice a mix of determination and resolve. They made it through the first line of defense, but now they were entering the heart of the planet's stronghold. It was a maze of structures, each one more heavily guarded than the last. The enemies knew they were coming, and they weren't going to make it easy. Deploy the ground troops, Varya commanded. Get us to the central command. We need to capture their leaders. Ethan's job was to keep the ship in the air, providing support as the ground troops made their way to the enemy's command center. But as they got closer, he could feel the tension rise. The enemy wasn't going to let this happen without a fight. The sky above was filled with the sounds of blaster fire and explosions as the two sides clashed. The ship rocked violently as they neared their destination. The enemy had deployed anti-aircraft fire, and the ship's shields flared with each hit. Ethan gritted his teeth, keeping his focus on the controls. Hang on, he shouted to the crew, his grip tightening on the console. We're almost there. Varya's voice came through the comms again. Prepare to land, we'll fight them on the ground. The ship touched down with a heavy thud, and the ground troops quickly disembarked, ready to fight. Ethan remained at his post, monitoring the ship's systems as Varya led her forces into battle. The sounds of blaster fire and explosions filled the air as the two sides clashed. It was chaos, but Varya's calm leadership kept her troops organized and focused. Ethan watched the battle unfold on his screens, feeling the weight of what was happening. This wasn't just a fight for the future of her empire. It was a fight for survival. Varya wasn't just fighting for power. She was fighting for everything her people had lost, and everything they could still be. His heart pounded in his chest as he watched the readouts. The battle was intense, but the tide was turning in their favor. The enemy was retreating, but they weren't done yet. Varya's forces pushed forward, making their way through the stronghold and getting closer to the central command. Ethan, we're almost there. Varya's voice crackled over the comms. Prepare to move us closer, we need to finish this. Ethan nodded, his fingers flying over the controls. I'm on it. Stay safe, Varya. He guided the ship closer to the battle, using every ounce of skill he had to avoid enemy fire and keep their position strong. The ship shuddered with each hit, but Ethan refused to give up. He knew what was at stake. This was the moment that could change everything. The final push came quickly. Varya's forces broke through the last line of defense and the central command was in their hands. The enemy's leadership was captured, and their power was shattered. As the battle came to a close, Ethan let out a sigh of relief. The fight was over. Varya had done it. She had reclaimed her empire. Varya's voice came through the comms once more, her tone victorious. We've won, Ethan. It's over. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaustion washing over him. The battle had been long and hard, but it was over now. They had won. And in that victory, they had restored hope to an entire galaxy. The aftermath of the battle was quieter than Ethan had expected. The hum of the ship's engines, once a constant backdrop to the chaos of combat, now seemed to echo through the halls with a sense of finality. The war was over. The enemies had been defeated, and Varia had regained control of her empire. But even in the calm, there was no sense of relief. Not yet. There was still so much work to be done. The planet, though victorious, was in shambles. Varia's forces had won, but the damage to the empire was deep. It would take time, years perhaps, for things to return to a semblance of normality. The rebuilding process had only just begun. Ethan stood by the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The vastness of space had always felt like a comfort, to him, a reminder of how small and insignificant the problems of the universe seemed in comparison. But now, it felt different. The stars no longer held the same sense of distance. They felt closer, more tangible. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind him. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Varia's presence was unmistakable even in silence. "You're still thinking about everything, aren't you?" she said, her voice soft yet firm. Ethan smiled without turning. "It's hard not to. You've just taken back an entire empire. That's a big deal." Varia stepped up beside him, her eyes also drawn to the view outside. "It's a beginning, not an end. There's much more to do, but this is where we start." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had joined her journey as an engineer, expecting nothing more than to fix a few broken systems to repair a ship. He never imagined he would be standing here now, part of a larger story, with the future of a galaxy hanging in the balance. Yet he had come to realize that it wasn't just the ship he had repaired. It was the beginning of something much bigger than either of them. "Where do we go from here?" Ethan asked, turning to face her. Varia looked at him, her eyes steady, but filled with an emotion he couldn't quite place. "We rebuild, Ethan. Not just the empire, but everything. Trust, hope, strength. My people have been divided for so long. It won't be easy, but it starts with the first step." Ethan studied her face, noting the exhaustion that was now visible in the lines of her expression. She had fought for so much, her empire, her people, her future. And yet in that moment she didn't look like a ruler. She looked like someone who had given everything for a cause she believed in. For a moment, she seemed less like an empress, and more like the person he had come to know. A warrior, a survivor, someone who had never given up. "You're not alone in this," Ethan said quietly. "You've got me, and you've got more than just soldiers now. You have people who believe in you." Varia's lips twitched slightly. It wasn't much of a smile, but it was something. "I know, Ethan, and I believe in you too. You've done more than I could have asked. You've helped me not just repair a ship, but save my empire. And for that I am grateful." Ethan felt a warmth spread through him at her words, but he couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of uncertainty. The battle may have been won, but the work was far from over. And now Varia wasn't just the woman who had asked for his help. She was his empress. The future of an entire galaxy rested on her shoulders and in many ways on his as well. "I'm not a politician," Ethan said, his voice tinged with doubt. "I'm an engineer. I don't know how to help rebuild a whole empire." Varia placed a hand on his shoulder, steady and reassuring. "You don't have to be a politician, Ethan. You've already helped more than most could ever dream. You're not just an engineer. You're a symbol of hope, a reminder that we can start over, no matter how broken we are." Ethan looked into her eyes, seeing the depth of what she meant. This wasn't just about ships or battles or technology. It was about people, about rebuilding lives and hope where it had been lost. "And you're not alone either," Ethan said, his voice firm. "I'll be here, whatever it takes." Varia nodded, a sense of finality in her expression. She turned toward the exit, but before she reached the door she paused. I may be the Empress of the Kalari Empire, but that doesn't mean I do this alone. I'll need help. From people I can trust. And you, Ethan, have proven that you're someone I can trust. Ethan watched her go, feeling the weight of her words. He had been part of something monumental, and in some small way, he knew that he had made a difference. He wasn't just fixing machines anymore. He was part of something far bigger, something that could change the future of an entire galaxy. As Varia disappeared into the corridors of the ship, Ethan turned back to the stars. The galaxy was vast, its possibilities endless. But for the first time, he didn't feel small. He felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The road ahead would be long and filled with challenges. There were still many obstacles to overcome, many pieces to put back together. But they would do it together. Varia's fight was his fight now, and he wasn't going anywhere. With a steady breath, Ethan turned away from the window, ready for whatever the future held. The battle for the galaxy was over, but the real journey, the journey of rebuilding, had only just begun.